This would be new parking, right?
I did.
Well, that's the,
Yeah, so that one
We're gonna
outright
have parking
was
over here.
new, or
So
if they
that's
were
not too
renovated, so like Kent
Okay, but
State,
that, we don't have that parking now.
That's correct.
This is the moving over to the west to save $1 million, but not
There's
pushing it
new
over
ones
there.
that have done the wet course and not good things.
Okay.
Yeah, Clemson is a good example of that. Kent State, interesting model, they put halfbacks in half of their rooms and nothing in half of them.
I figured the price differential that it means.
Yeah.
I hit my razor.
Yeah.
Well, with, Mr. Chairman, with, Trustee Erickson and Trustee Salazar here, Trustee Soto and Trustee Little on the phone, and Trustee Thompson is walking in the door as we speak, I think you have a quorum if you want to call the meeting to order.
Okay, to call to order the 2019 special board meeting of Laramie County Community College District Board of Trustees. And since I'm not there, I will let Joe delegate the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The first thing, I just want to thank you for being willing and flexible to get together kind of on short notice for this residence hall conversation. I want to give you a project status update. I'll let Vice President Johnson talk a little bit about the bidding process, how we got here, and some of the solutions, including a pretty significant one, which is the proposed shifting of the location and why that worked out. But let me just give the background. It's interesting with a lot of these construction projects. I feel like we're riding this emotional roller coaster with them constantly. You win and you get ahead, and then something happens, and then you win and you get ahead, and then something happens. So as you recall, early on, because of the configuration of the loan structure with the State Loan Investment Board and the new community college dorm loan project, we were anticipating that we would have had to have brought about $2.8 million to that project just to service the debt early on in that structure. So early on in the project, we were committed to moving forward with it, bringing $2.8 million to the project to get it going, knowing that in the later years in the residence hall project, we start to recoup some of those revenues, especially as we get further out in Vice President Johnson's viability model. Well, as we got into implementing and closing on that loan, the State Loan Investment Board, of course, came back and said, hey, I think we probably want to do it the way you originally proposed, which actually moved a lot of that debt in our first payments out until we occupied like a traditional construction loan. And so all of a sudden we didn't need that $2.8 million. And as you recall, we celebrated that we wouldn't have to go to the reserves to get this project done and all that wonderful stuff. And we could use those funds potentially for other projects down the road. Well, as we started going through the CMAR, the Construction Manager at Risk process with FCI, who is our contractor, and started going through and doing secondary test validation of what we thought the subcontractor bid market would be, we started seeing some red flags, specifically around the mechanical, plumbing, electrical. Rick, tell me if I get off on any of these. And we knew we were going to be over budget already. Rick went to work with our contractor, with the team, with everybody, and basically we valued engineered about $4 million out of this project to get it where we wanted it to be. Went to bid, came back after bid, and we got a guaranteed maximum price of $36.5 million roughly. So we were, even after reducing $4 million, the construction market still suggested this is a $36 million project. So to say we were shocked would be an understatement. The fact that our contractor and our architect, everybody else was shocked with how rapid the escalation of the construction environment has happened here and what it's doing. And that's really what this is these bids are coming in far greater and far higher than we thought that they would be. And so we've got this environment where all of a sudden our project is again way over budget because of what's happening with the construction market here. So again, Vice President Johnson and Vice President Hay and Dean Miller and all the wonderful folks on the team went back to work and have been working real hard to get the project where we believe it's closer to a doable project again. Right now, we're about $3.2 million, 3.3 pending the shifting of the location with that. And that's really the purpose of this meeting, for us to keep our timeline to get ground broken and get moving so that we can still occupy by the fall of 2020. We've got to keep the process moving, and I just couldn't hold this until your meeting on the 24th to do that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'd like Rick just to talk a little bit about the bidding process and then how we landed on, or the bids and how they came in and where we're at price-wise, and then how we landed on the new location. And then I have a specific recommendation or request to get your authorization to again, go back to our fund balance, our reserves, and spend $2 million to get the project, or up to $2.5 million to get the project where it needs to be so we can move forward. So Rick, you want to kind of walk them through the financial side and then the location piece?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just re-step here a bit. We thought we had a $30 million project. So we got the bids in. The price based on the bids was $35.7. So we immediately went into cost reduction mode, working to figure out what could we take out of the project that wouldn't necessarily impact what we're trying to accomplish, the aesthetic value of the facility, functionality of the facility, these sorts of things. And we got that down to $32.8. And then FCI stepped up in this process and said, you know, it's occurred to us that if you move this facility from the east to the west, you're going to save a bundle of money, principally because there's utilities we don't have to relocate. It's fairly flat ground as opposed to the east side. We're not demoing an existing parking lot. And there's a lot of retaining walls and whatnot that wouldn't have to be built by moving to the west. So they priced that initially, and it's rough, but they've told me they've been conservative. That results in a $250,000 savings moving from the east to the west. So after our cuts, where we got down to 33 million, basically, if we relocate to the west, we're going to save 1.25 million. And we're going to have a little bit of incremental cost with our civil engineer to redraw where we place it in the survey, and some landscape rework in the design. That stuff's maybe going to cost me $50,000 or $60,000. So right now, last word I have from FCI is this brings us in at maybe 31.9. So at the moment, what I can tell you confidently is we're between 31.9 and 33, and work's still going on. A meeting occurred today at 2 p.m. with the county planning department, which Bill's in attendance. There was a fear that moving the building to the west would start a do-over with the permitting and planning process that the county has. If there was a complete do-over, that killed us because too much time goes by before FCI can get going. Try not to mess up the report I got from you, Bill, 30 minutes ago, but it sounds like the county is perfectly willing to think about this, not in the context of a complete do-over, but just a site plan change. It's the same building, moving it from east to west and rotating it. And so the result of that meeting is that there's a few little steps we have to accomplish here, but FCI could be doing groundwork soon, a week or two.
Yes, good question. Have we already paid a building permit?
Yeah.
And that was in the amount of 141,000 or something?
110.
Yeah.
Okay, 110.
Going from memory here, Don.
All right, thank you.
We're not going to pay that twice. The county actually has been very, it sounds like, compassionate to this situation that we found ourselves in.
We're
And
willing to
support
work with us, issue a grading permit to get the ball rolling. So at least there's work going on while some redesign is taking place. We can get two things going at the same time. So very willing to help.
I didn't mean to disrupt your
No, I
presentation.
appreciate that, Don. Did I cover what?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, members of the board, there's the big things we want to bring to your attention, the shift of the hall to the west. The more we've talked about this, there's actually some advantages to doing that, even besides the financial component of it. Certainly we were trying to keep that what do we call it, the Eagles neighborhood? No. Eagle Village kind of consolidated and try to fill that middle area, but actually moving it to the west creates two sort of unique access points for the two main halls. It provides some close connection and intersection with the soccer fields and some of the amenities to the north. There are some things that actually make that a little bit more appealing. It gives each hall its own parking space, as I say, so you weren't having to put everybody clear out west and have them walk clear to the east hall if that's where they were living. So there are some benefits. There are certainly some challenges, with what we originally conceptualized, but for the cost savings, the location, and really what method our architect has done with it, we think is a very viable and workable situation. They actually proposed a handful, and after looking at parking space, proximity to the existing halls, but also giving space for that point in time in the future when we want to take down the west hall, the location that's proposed is actually really, I think, a pretty good option given the solution we're under. So that's one of the big pieces. And then before we would commit to bringing up to $2.5 million back to this project, I really need to get your approval to do that, at least the approval for the expenditure of authorization. So with that, I know that you have questions. I guess I would pause, and Rick and I will do our best to answer any questions that you may have. And Mr. Chairman, I'll do my best to kind of run the meeting on this end, and then for those of you on the phone, just jump in if you have questions, and we'll make sure you're heard and answered.
Thanks, Joe.
Can we just have Jess? Is he the only one on the phone?
Brenda,
Brenda,
Wendy,
Brenda?
and Wendy are on the phone.
Oh, they're
as
all
well.
on,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I do have a few questions, but I may be able to get caught up just through you, President Schaefer, for Rick. And I may be able to get caught up on this maybe with Nola and Rick at a separate time, but, I have a lot of questions like, you guys have already talked about, does the revenue from, does the dorm revenue pay for the loan when we start paying it in 2021, or just questions like that. How are we going to finance the other 1.3? Because I know we talked about, well, you might want to address that before I.
Well, let me jump in,
Okay.
Janine, with the first part. So I have a viability model that I'd be happy to run you through.
Yeah, I'd
Some of
like
the
to.
trustees have seen
Yeah.
it. It'll help you understand how we've thought about the project and how we believe it's very viable.
Okay.
So that solves the $30 million problem, right?
Right.
Because we modeled at 30.
Right.
We're viable at 30. So that's solid.
Okay.
The extra that we now need to top this off is really separate from our SLIB loan in that whole side of the picture.
Right.
This is basically a top off, drawing from fund balance. No payback unless we paid ourselves back, in that.
Which we would have in the model as we get out past, especially past 2025, if you want to. As we get out beyond 2025, we actually will start generating revenue because we pay off the East Hall. And so we could feasibly pay ourselves back, but the problem has always been getting into this project now, and now we're back to, for different reasons, having to bring some money early on that we could pay ourselves back as we go. And Rick, I don't know if you want to just quick hit the highlights on your model up there. If we can.
This is just a summary picture, Janine, which
Okay.
I could take you through the details.
Okay. And you don't have to get that detail now, Rick. We can do that
No,
another time too.
just to give you some reassurance on your first question. If you just focus here, this is the annual net profit and loss
Okay.
based on our projections of the res hall from now all the way out to FY 44, which is as long as the debt service with the SLIB runs.
Okay.
This is the rough period that Joe's referring to. In sum total, that rough period, actually, we have a net gain of $385,000. Beyond that, we're in great shape. This is ending year-end fund balance, and this is annual net profit and loss. So the request to use fund balance to top this off up to 2.5 million is separate from that.
Well, and you know the numbers, and Dawn, and I thank you for taking the moment to educate me, and I'll learn more as we go, because I trust you, that you've seen it, you know the numbers, and you're awesome. So I thank you for running that down. The only, another concern that I was looking at is we talked about using some of that fund money or the auxiliary money for the shortfall on the fine arts building. So are we dipping into that same money that we were talking about to because we're over 3 million on that one?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Trustee Thompson asked about probably what is the bigger consideration here is the opportunity cost of using these fund balances for this project. We have essentially 3 other projects that are sort of coming online. One long-term, which is the rack remodel, and then we have the fine arts project, and then the renovation of the EEC building to do that. We won't know final bids on EEC until next week. Fine arts, we know what we estimated that project was over $3 million to do that. And then of course the rack is still, we're going back through the CapCon process, so I don't know where that will get to. Our hope, and we don't know this yet, but our hope is that right now with what Simple Brown is doing with GH Phipps, our contractor and architect on fine arts, we're going to be able to close that gap and still get where we need to be with that. I don't know that I would suggest or believe we will need to bring any type of fund balance support to the fine arts project. We just need to go back through and do the value engineering to get us there. And in a $15 million project, that $3 million sounds like a lot, but we also started, as Rick's pointed out before, the library with a significant overage like that as well. And we found ways to deliver on the library project, real effectively there too. So I don't anticipate at this point that I would bring or request bringing any fund balance to the EC or the fine arts project. So to me, really the opportunity.
With a little bit on the EC.
On the EC piece, which we've accounted for already in the piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
130,000 projected at the moment.
Yeah.
From fund balance to top that off. However, if 1 mil revenues from our election continue to escalate, the valuations, that might go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Things are escalating at a pace that are greater than what we modeled. Valuation increases. I mean,
which results in an increase in the value of 1 mil in Laramie County, essentially. And so that's actually a positive trend for us from a revenue perspective to do that. So to me, that the opportunity cost is really that these funds won't be available should we proceed with the recreation athletics complex, which will result in us, having to find those funds elsewhere. But we are going back through the process. We'll be asking the state for 50% of that project in the traditional CapCon model. And so there's a lot of moving parts with that one yet. So that's where knowing we started with the commitment of 2.8 million to this project to go forward, and we were okay with that. Knowing that this amount for me is probably the make or break. Do you move forward with the residence hall project or not? I don't know that I suggest we add any other type of debt structure to this or get into that, even though the model is viable once we get out. It's already complex enough. We already have significant enough debt just to get it constructed. This seems like the right approach if we want to commit to getting this project done. And I think we'll be able to get the other projects done as well. Like I say, the rack would be the one wild card in my mind.
Yeah.
one piece I'd add, logical question is, well, what if we don't do the res hall project? It's out of budget, can't get it back to 30. We could pull it. Just check these numbers today. Our cost of doing that's probably about 1.4 million. In other words, that's what we will have spent if we pull it.
Paying back the loan and.
No, I'm assuming we can solve that other ways. What I'm talking about is the money that we have paid method and the pre-construction money we would owe FCI for their work up to the point
Sure.
with which we pulled the project. It looks to be 1.4. So that's the
Doesn't seem like
cost
a
of
good
pulling
that
it.
doesn't seem like a good option to me. In my,
We didn't say it was a good option.
Dr. Joe, the top amount for the cost of this project right now is at what amount?
If we leave it on the east, 32.8.
Okay,
Excuse me, 33. I'm sorry,
33.
Doug was reading the wrong way.
Okay, and then
A little over 33.
and the recommendation from the SCI folks is that we move it over to the west because of the various reasons that you've already enumerated, besides saving some money. So that would bring us down to 32 point something,
It would bring us down to 31.8,
31.8.
Mhm.
Okay, so
31.9.
so you're looking at somewhere between 1.8 million and 2.5 million, and you're asking for the opportunity to go up to 2.5 million from our invested reserves. Now, would those invested reserves, that funding, would that be upfront payments, or would that be later?
No, this would come at the end.
If it comes at the end, then the next question is, can we work it out so that when we're removing those holdings that we have in that invested account, that it's at maturity rather than stopping it after 2 years or 3 years?
I don't think we'll be dipping into any investments. This is our operating fund balance in 1 mil coal lease bonus, health science contingency that we have left over, and Pathfinder contingency that we have left over. So that's immediate cash. So
Okay,
there's no investment.
but we're asking for, okay, then I guess I'm somewhat confused. I thought that we were going to be dipping into our invested funds.
So Trustee Erickson, we will be utilizing fund, it is confusing. In fact, it's confusing for me too. And so Nolan, Rick always try to explain this to me. We have approximately $5 million of
Right.
invested funds that you're aware of. In total, in terms of funds that we actually have available, and I don't know if I'm using the right terms, it's actually probably closer to $10 million because we have fund balance, which is essentially a reserve on the 1 mil fund. Plus we carry we've had these carryover fund balances, a remainder of funds from Pathfinder and Flex Tech, coal lease bonus funds we received from the state, health science. I think the health science building still has some of those. And then we also have the general fund balance, which is on the operating budget,
Okay.
that balance, which is probably the majority of what's, I would say, invested at any given time. And so this isn't dipping into or selling I don't know if we have them securities, but selling those investments we have. This is actually, for the most part, utilizing funds we have.
Yeah, so what we have, Don, is when you see our financials, we're only covering funds 10, 13, and 14, and fund 12. When we look at coal lease bonus, that's sitting in the fund 70 account, so it's basically held in cash in A&D Bank.
Well, thank you for that clarification, because
Yeah.
when you first sent the email out, I got the impression it was going to be the invested funds. But as I read the motion, and I'm now reading the motion, I hadn't read the motion before, and that is that up to 2.5 million of 1 mil and other miscellaneous fund balances, which is much more delightful for me than dipping into the invested funds. So the discussion is really a lot different in my mind. And I have one other comment I'd like to make. I do share your pain.
Mhm.
I mean, the anxiety that we've had on this project has been extraordinarily troublesome. And it's amazing. It seems like every month there's it just doesn't seem, well, actually it's worse than that. It just keeps going like that. So now you've hopefully come to a resolution that we can make this happen. And I go back to when I remember the architect from Method sitting over there giving the presentation of this beautiful building that we're going to have. It's going to be something that's going to be extraordinarily good. And I said, can you stay within the $30 million budget? He said, oh yeah, we've had lots of history of doing this in other areas and we stayed within budget. Wow. I'll tell you what, I don't have a very good feeling intellectually or emotionally to this architectural group. And I know as we move along and as this goes forward in the construction, there's going to be some change orders, and there's going to be a couple of other things that are going to happen in all these darn projects, and there's going to be a request for some more dollars. And I would hope that with the board approval on this, that there's a stern message, at least reporting what I have to say, if nothing else, to the architect to keep this down in the future and stay within what they said they could do.
Fair point, duly noted, Trustee Erickson. I think that's been a frustration, and I don't know about pointing fingers or doing that. The volatility of everything through these processes is just, I think, the most frustrating. And part of that's the environment we live in right now. The good thing about our approach of using a construction manager at risk, a CMAR, we will get a new guaranteed maximum price. And unless we decide to do something different, we will build that project for that guaranteed maximum price without any type of overage or under things. And that's really the benefit of the CMAR process. So they gave us a guaranteed maximum price that wasn't within our budget. We've gone to work, tried to be where we're at. We will get a guaranteed maximum price. It cannot exceed the 30 million plus whatever you authorize me up to today. We'll have to build the project for those funds.
Thank you for that. And my comment wasn't to point the finger. It's basically to make it known that we're upset about the trouble that we've been having. And I think that there's some onus on method. They said that they could do this. I mean, I think we have it recorded in our minutes. And I just wanted to remind everybody of that particular conversation. And I'm very, with the construction management personnel that you have, I'm confident that that'll all work out well. We've worked with them before, so it should go far. Good.
Hey, I have just a couple of questions. Maybe the other trustees who are on the phone have asked these already. So if they had, I'm okay with hearing your answer, their answer. But I was thinking about the design and what things have been given up in the design. What things have, I understand there's a breezeway between some buildings, and there can't be now, according to how this picture looks. So was there a cost reduction because of not having that breezeway, or is there some plan for that? That's the first question. That's the second question, same time, is I heard you say you rotated the building. And I think that when the architect did the initial design, there was lots of concerns about the wind flow patterns and different things like that. So how is that addressed with this rotating? And is there going to be additional costs now from the architect or others if we are concerned about those wind flow patterns and things that might happen?
Yeah, let me address the last first, holding this up. The way this opening to the courtyard in the east location is due north. Those wind studies looked at how would that work, because in the winter we get the northwest to north winds, and now we've rotated it clockwise, where this opening is more to the northeast. And this is the high side of the building, the north side. And so there's a lot of confidence that actually this rotation has improved complications with the wind in that courtyard.
Okay.
To your first point, we've really, Bob, been through two significant efforts to cut back as this thing's evolved. Rather typical with the project. That list in totals may be in excess of 100 items. This last go around, it totaled 34 items. And, highlights here are there is no breezeway. And actually, which we struggled with. But then got some feedback from Res Hall that actually it might be better without a breezeway for other reasons. So when we trip over things, sometimes we realize there's other things here that we hadn't considered that come to play. We've cut back some finishes. For example, there's these vestibule areas where we were going to have a nice warm wood ceiling. We've eliminated the wood ceiling, going with a cheaper ceiling. We were going to have card access. I'm hitting highlights here, Bob. Do card access on the doors to the rooms rather than issuing everybody a key. And we've cut that because that's a very costly thing to put electronic proximity card readers on the doors. Let me hit the other big ones, Bob, bear with me. We reduced paving thickness a little bit from where we were. We reduced landscape significantly. By the time we're done, maybe to code minimum, but Method's been, and SCI has been trying to retain something a little bit greater than code minimum. But the county does require a certain level of landscape at a construction project. The showers got cut back a little bit in what was anticipated. Shower walls, the flex space, which is, I'm sorry for those on the phone, but that's the space right here. We currently have that as shelled and not finished. And this has even brought up some ideas on that maybe Joe would like to get into about in the future, what some interesting things we could do to actually get to that shelling back in. We changed the siding on the building from what was initially spec'd to a lesser siding. It's still a cementitious siding, which was what was spec'd, commercial, of course. But this siding, and this is like a biggie, this is like a $700,000 savings. That siding in 10 or 15 years, based on the warranty, will need painting. Whereas the siding that was originally spec'd was such that that wouldn't be the case, presumably. So, and of course, remember, we get out 10 or 15 years in the model, we're generating the revenues to paint our building. So it seemed like a good one to take, for example. We made a change in some above ground sewers from cast iron to PVC. And then moving to the west is the big savings, 1.25 million. So those are the highlights, Bob. What we tried to retain, however, without impacting too much, is the atrium, which is kind of that showpiece public part of the res hall, hasn't been changed too much. The rooms, on the table was removing the sinks from the rooms, which was a $500,000 savings. And so far, we've decided to not take that savings and keep a sink in the rooms. And this is more a recruiting decision or perception of the recruiting value. If you're looking at a room and there's no sink, even though we have the wet cores that might impact us there.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Lot.
I guess I'm just kind of a feng
Lots
shui
of
kind of guy, and I think that, you know, I know you've done a good job of addressing
I might add
the
something.
costs.
I just thought of, in this last round of cuts, we asked the question to everybody involved, do you think with the cuts we're making, have we eroded the beauty, functionality, recruiting possibilities for this structure? And in every case, every person said, we haven't impacted it that way.
And we're still
Now-
continuing to have 350.
That's what I was
352 beds.
that's what I was wondering.
Now, for those of us that have been immersed in the process, I feel like we just keep, pulling hair out of my head and I'm almost down to pulling it all out. And I'm the one that asked that question of everybody. So if you haven't been immersed in it and you see the final result, you may be impressed. If you've been immersed in it, and we let this go, we're going to have a breezeway, all this stuff, you're feeling pretty low. But
Okay, thanks for that. So then, this isn't critical, but this thing right here, is that the main corridor, the main walkway?
that's correct. This actually orients nice with the spine of campus.
Terminates the other end of the academic building.
Kind of does at the west end what the Flex Tech building does at the east end. Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any other comments or questions,
Jess, Wendy, Brenda, any questions that you have?
Nothing from me, Joe.
Okay, Rick's got,
If anybody's ready to make a motion, that would be great.
okay, Rick's got one more thing to add and then
Yeah, I think it's
certainly.
important to make this point. Going through our last big set of meetings on this late last week. And FCI thought that they would have a new guaranteed maximum price for us by today-ish. Walking in here, I don't have that yet. And Bill and I were conferring, maybe we won't see that until tomorrow. The point I want to leave with you is I've yet to get that. I don't know what that number is going to be when I get it. It could be better than what I last saw last Thursday. Or God forbid, it's worse. I mean, I don't know what would cause it to go worse, but hopefully I'll have that tomorrow.
So, what is the latest possible date you can make a decision? Or voted on something, but I'm hearing that. And is there why today to make the decision? I'm not arguing, I'm just trying to understand.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Salazar, for a couple of reasons. One is just the time when they want to start moving dirt ASAP. Two is honestly to accommodate my timeline because I'm traveling, I will be off, and we've got the commission meetings and stuff, and we didn't feel like we could push it towards the end of next week, let alone to the 24th. So this really made that day to do that. They really do. I mean, we wanted to be breaking ground by now.
Yeah.
And so we're running out of time. And so the sooner we get the go ahead to do it, with my recommendation to you to spend up to 2.5 million, if for some reason that guaranteed maximum price comes in and that won't cover it, then we probably stop the project. And I'm getting a little bit struggling with that. We could come back and ask for more, but honestly, we're pushing the bounds of the project as it is in my mind to do this. It is a very strategic risk, if you will, an investment in our future. And I think it's a well-researched and thought out one for this campus and this community to do it. But there's only so much escalation that you can take with that. But this is what I'm asking for, up to 2.5 million. And I think I've been clear certainly with Vice President Johnson, but we've been sharing that with our contractor. We've got to get in at this price point or below. So that's, to me, is 32.5 million or below, so we can move forward with this project.
Dr. Joe, if I heard correctly, you were expecting this to be between 31.8 and 32.5.
9.
No, 31.9.
31.9 and pop being 32.5.
That, with your approval, so what we have in terms of a range, as Vice President Johnson said, it was basically at the high end right now, 33 or 31.9 at the low end with that. So you're getting the point, 2.5 million will not get us to 33 million. We may be forced then to take the $500,000 savings on the sink or something and have to do another VE to get that down to that point to get there. You certainly can make an adjustment to the motion. I feel comfortable saying we can bring up to 2.5. Could we bring up to 3? Probably, but then you're getting further and further at utilizing those reserves that reduce opportunities down the road with us, and I'm just not comfortable making that recommendation to you.
If I could, but just add these reserves, that cash on hand, total 3.6.
That's what I was just gonna ask. If we're gonna use it all, so, okay,
No, you won't use it all.
right,
Um,
close.
Right. And I'm, as I've shared with folks here, well, I appreciate the fiscal conservancy of saving money. I don't believe in saving money just to save money. There's a reason you reserve money, and it's for those challenging situations in which you can leverage it to make sure that your strategic plans are advanced. This is one of those things to do that. But I'm also not to the point where you zero those things out when you have unforeseen future to do that. As Rick says, there's roughly 3.6 between these miscellaneous funds. Well, 3.4 something because we have to take some to the EEC, but about say 3.5 in these miscellaneous funds in the 1 mil. We would be using up to 2.5 of that. So there leaves $1 million for it, but that's sort of the what ifs on the fine arts, the EEC, or those types of things if we absolutely have to go down there. And I guess I can't get myself to say we're willing to put all that on the table for this project.
Now, Rick, you
I
said
see.
one other thing I'm kind of curious about. The 1 mil, you said there's some upside from the 1 mil because of property valuations. Is that taken into account in what your planning estimates here?
No, what I was talking about is as we go forward from here forward, with the way valuations going in Laramie County, that 1 mil on the election is probably going to bring in more than we thought it would. And so far, it has been. So the point I was making is that escalation is very likely to continue.
Okay, so then, but maybe I'm not understanding.
To your point, we could rebuild the 1 mil fund balance in the future because we anticipate seeing increased revenues there, which means that as we set the annual 1 mil budget, we won't want to expend it all. We'll want to have portions of it that would purposely go into the reserves. And so that's a shift from what we've done historically. We've built the reserves more based on unspent revenues at the end of the year than strategically setting those funds aside.
Okay,
Does that,
yeah,
okay, can I get
that
that?
answers my question.
Dr. Joe, I appreciate your statement about there's a limit as to how much we're going to pay. However, I would hope that if for some reason, and I just hope that it doesn't happen, that we need more than 2.5, that we don't just scrap it, that we come back and have another conversation. Okay? And with that, if it's time for a motion, Mr. Chair, is it time for a motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd be happy to make it that the Board of Trustees authorizes the president to expend up to 2.5 million of 1 mil and other miscellaneous fund balances to cover the escalated costs associated with the construction of the new residence hall on the Cheyenne campus.
I'll second that motion. This is Wendy.
Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Erickson and seconded by Vice Chairman Soto. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I have another comment, and I think it has to do with I consider to be a lesson learned. We're seeing these projects that were originally estimated back about 1.5 years or so years ago. And we have the RAC estimated at 14 million. And our recent request to the legislature requested a 50% of that, or 7 million. I believe are going to be a shortfall. And so my lesson learned that I see is that we need to ask the legislature for more.
So Trustee Erickson, to your point, we were there, actually Bill and Rick were there. The capital construction request that's due to the commission here for June for the residence hall will actually, or the residence hall, the recreation athletics complex will actually be 18 million, half of which we would request from the state. So escalation. And that number wasn't necessarily just drawn out of the air, although a little bit. We keep trying to apply an anticipated escalator based on previous year's escalations. And that escalation is increasing. So with this project, with fine arts, with all the projects here, 2 or 3 years ago, we said to the architects, build in an escalator where we have escalators anywhere from 3 to 5%. I don't remember what it was on the residence hall piece, but we're seeing escalation in the double digits. I mean, and that's the challenge here, is that the irony is not lost on me. We're trying to ramp up programs in plumbing and electrical and stuff like that. And we can't build buildings because there aren't plumbers or electricians to do it. It's driving the wages up. So we're recognizing that. And with the RAC, what we've done in our CapCon submission is said, let's plan for the worst. And based on these escalators, we're estimating that $14 million project will be an $18 million project if and when we get funding for it. So we're trying our best. But
Well, as a trustee, I can say that I am just very pleased that you and your staff are ahead of the curve. And it's good to hear that. It really is. You would have been informing us of this particular move down the road here, but it's good to hear it right now.
Wow. It's a lot of work.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Trustee Soto, and I so move.
And I second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning the August 9th, 2019 special board meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don, one of the